Welcome to Q&A practice. Let's start with defense attorney. Ready? Here we go. I do agree under the circumstances that the defense should have the right to interview Mr. Dassey first, but under the circumstances I see no reason to prohibit any representative of the state from interviewing Mr. Dassey later. Again, for those reasons that have been stated earlier, we are talking about one fairly narrow statement here that is referenced in at least two different spots in the discovery that was admittedly provided to the defense. I think the remedy the court has ordered should be sufficient to address this issue. Likewise, I don't believe the court will simply inform the jury for the convenience of the parties and the witnesses. We are going to hear from Officer Austin, and the cross-examination of Mr. Dassey will be completed tomorrow morning. That happens on a fairly routine basis in many trials for a variety of reasons, and the court has never known that to be something that is likely to influence the jury in any way. So, at this time, we will bring the jurors back in. Then, Mr. Kratz, you can call your witness. Thank you. What was the exhibit number of pages 516 and 517? Okay. Don't we have another issue? There is another issue that I will take up tomorrow morning. I don't believe it was required to be taken up now. Okay. Judge, regarding Mr. Austin, I told the court that Mr. Austin intends to explain his process through a PowerPoint demonstration, which, after we're concluded, I will mark and make part of the record. I do have a hard copy for the court to follow along. I have provided Mr. Buting with Mr. Strang and with a copy as well so they can follow along. And finally, as I alerted the court later in this trial, some of these computer images may be in fact referred to in a small subset of these images. I also have some 4x6 images made to complete the record. I will provide those and have those marked as well to be identified by this witness at the conclusion of his testimony. But I will give the court and the clerk the exhibits here, and the court can follow along with the PowerPoint demonstration as well. We are prepared to proceed then. Very well, you may be seated. Members of the jury, for reasons relating to availability of witnesses, we are going to take a witness out of order at this time. The defense will be conducting its cross-examination of Mr. Dassey tomorrow morning, and the state is going to call another witness at this time. Mr. Kratz, we will call Trooper Tim Austin at this time. Mr. Austin, how are you employed? I am employed as a trooper with the Wisconsin State Patrol. I'm assigned to the Wisconsin State Patrol Academy to the Technical Reconstruction Unit. Can you tell us what the Technical Reconstruction Unit is? The Technical Reconstruction Unit is a specialized unit, if you will, of persons that work with crash reconstructions and crime scene reconstructions for the Division of the State Patrol. Could you briefly set forth your education, training, and experience in the areas of scene modeling? Yes, sir. I have been trained and certified as an instructor in the field of forensic diagramming, which includes the use of computer-aided drafting or drawing software and a geodemer, which is basically an electronic surveying device for collecting measurements. Now, Trooper Austin, we will be referring to the large screen here in the courtroom. This is what is known as a PowerPoint presentation or PC presentation software. Could you first of all just tell the jury what we will be looking at during the testimony and how this was created? Yes, to assist with my testimony under the direction of Mr. Kratz, I created a PowerPoint presentation. What you will see is a series of slides that will help to bring us through the forensic mapping project that I did in this particular case. You will see some images in 2 dimensions and some 3-dimensional computer scenes that I generated. All right, what is forensic mapping? Forensic mapping is the science, if you will, of collecting measurements at a crash or crime scene and then putting them together later in either a 2-dimensional diagram or 3-dimensional models, such as my objective in this particular case to collect measurements at the given property and later to bring those measurements into the office to create two-dimensional diagrams and some three-dimensional models. Specifically, Trooper Austin, on November 5th of 2005, were you asked to proceed to, and did you, in fact, proceed to a property known as the Avery Salvage Yard? Yes, on November 5th of 2005, I was requested by local law enforcement to go to the Avery property in Manitowoc County for the purpose of forensic mapping. How long were you at that property? The forensic mapping activities went from November 5th through November 12th of that year. You mentioned, I think earlier, that this forensic mapping process requires the taking of measurements. Can you describe that process and how many measurements were involved? Yes, as I said before, we utilized an electronic measuring device in addition to recording some measurements by hand with tape measures, if you will, but the bulk of the measurements were taken using an electronic device known as the geodimeter, Geodimeter, or the total station. In total, we documented over 4,100 measurements at the Avery property. Tell us about the total station process, please. Certainly, the total station, as I said before, is an electronic device composed of an electronic distance measuring system, which just measures distance from the total station to a given evidentiary point. It also has a theodolite, which measures angles. It also has a data collector and a prism. Just for the record and for the reporter's benefit, a hard copy of this will be provided for the spellings of everything you said. That this is a picture of the geodimeter. Is that correct? Yes. And those other devices that are used to create these measurements are included within the total station package itself. Is that correct? Yes, that is correct. Hence the name total station. It measures not just angles like a transit would, it also measures distance, and that is because we have a theodolite and a distance measuring system in here. We have a total package, or hence a total station. I'm sure Mr. Platt would like you to slow down just a little more. That would be terrific. Can you tell us about the information storage and retrieval? Certainly. Again, what the total station does is measures the distance and angles to a particular location. For example, if I were measuring an item of evidentiary value where Mr. Katz is, I would ask him to hold the prism over that item of evidentiary value. The total station would recognize the angle to Mr. Katz both horizontally and vertically. It would then measure the distance. What it will document is that particular point's location in 3D space. In other words, along an x-axis, a y-axis, and a z-axis based on where the total station is located. If there is another point on the other side of the courtroom, it would do the same thing, distance and angle to that particular point. It stores that data in an onboard data collector, which you see in the lower pictures. Is that basically a computer? Yes, it is. And it does convert these horizontal and vertical angles to x, y, and z coordinates for later retrieval. All right, let's talk about the total station's accuracy. Can you tell the jury just how accurate is this process? This particular total station has a maximum angular error or induced error from instruments of 3 seconds. So what that means, as I said before, it measures in angles. If I take a circle, that circle is divided into 360 degrees. Each degree is divided into 60 minutes. Each minute is divided into 60 seconds. So this particular instrument is accurate to within 3 of those seconds. Mr. Kratz, at this particular scene, the longest shot distance was about 1,200 feet. If I calculate it out mathematically, that means our maximum error induced by the instrument is less than a ½ inch. All right, let's talk about the location, the Avery Salvage property itself. I have put your next slide on the screen, and feel free to use the laser pointer or whatever you may need to explain or describe for this jury, please, the mapping locations. In this slide, I put an aerial photo of the Avery property. The purpose of this was to show that we had actually forensically mapped out this entire location. That is, everything that you see here on the screen was mapped out using that geodometer total station. This second slide, Mr. Kratz, shows us a different view, another aerial photo of the same property. This time we have changed it so north is to the left side of the screen, and in the boxes where it shows the Avery salvage property, that map was created, and I put this slide up because in addition to mapping the Avery salvage property, we also completed some forensic mapping at what is best described as the deer camp. I was not privy as to who owns the deer camp. I know it's an unrelated person. We did forensic mapping at this location too, and also a cul-de-sac at the end of Cuss Road. The areas we mapped were somewhat considerable in terms of geographic location, if you will. Are you familiar with a term called CAD drawing? Yes, sir. From a two-dimensional standpoint, describe that for the jury, please. And we will stop there. That will conclude our Q&A practice.